welcome back to another episode of the DevCoaches podcast. We're glad you're here today. Today we've got Randall Clapper, Pat Toner, myself, Dave Balzer, Matt LoPiccolo, and online we're joined by Victor Pudelski and Morgan Willis. Welcome, guys.
It took all of my self-control to not clap when you said Randall's name.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sure that's exactly what you wanted to do when you heard Randall's name.
Yep.
So Matt, you want to tell us what we're talking about today?
I mean, I can try to tell us what we're going to talk about. We'll see how it goes. I think we wanted to talk a little bit about the idea or the practice of remote work, working outside of the primary facility in which you're employed, which we thought would be fun with a few remote individuals for our podcast and even for the Guild itself. So I think this will be an interesting discussion for us all.
Hello, remote people.
Hello, local people.
Engaging content. Thanks, guys.
All right. So, what in particular about working remotely do we want to talk about?
Well, what about the challenges that you face, being a remote worker?
Like what?
Well, I've done remote work, but in the past, I would say communication is probably one of the top challenges in doing remote work.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like, for instance, it took us like an hour and a half to get set up today to make this happen.
No, it took 4 hours to get set up today to make this happen. If we're honest, It took the last half an hour just to get Randall to come back from lunch when we were supposed to already be working.
Like I said, communication.
Yeah.
It's difficult because I think it's way easier to communicate effectively when you're in the same place as people, and it's really it's magnified how difficult it is. When they're not just like if you guys were literally in the next room, we would still have the same problems. If we were not allowed to go in there and talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I actually just had this where I'm working is the team I work on. We were dispersed a little bit and communication was okay, but it wasn't great. We moved everybody to one room right next to each other and communication increased immediately.
Yeah.
So what you're saying then
I know
is,
for me, I work online for this. So I'm communicating with other online instructors and students, and then the other half of my time I'm in person, and it is way easier. It's so much easier to communicate with students, other instructors in person. It's like everything that I try to do online takes 15 times longer than it takes for me to just tell somebody in person. So communication. I muted myself on accident.
so the technical problems of communication should be, between Mike and
So
Tim.
communication, technical issues, all of the above. But I know it's to work online effectively, you have to be an expert communicator. So if not everybody on your team is really good at communication, then you're going to have extreme issues.
But even being an expert, it still takes just the back and forth of waiting 5-10 minutes between sending a message and getting a response. It turns a 5-minute in-person conversation into an 11-day affair. And especially if you have people who are actually remote and they're in different time zones and they're not even awake at the same time as you, it becomes you get some flexibility from having people work in different locations, but what you lose is the ability to work quickly. You have to be on point at all times. And I don't know, I would think what the kind of setup we have here, I would think you would need this to be effective in almost any remote team. Because this is okay, what we have here, in the sense that if you guys were if we were working together and you were just sitting there and then I could turn on the mic and then we're talking and then we turn it off, whatever. We could mimic it somewhat that way. But like that's not what people actually do. What they actually do is they sit at home like alone, and then they use Slack to talk to everybody, and it takes all day to do anything.
So working
Right, and I think like I was going to say, I think that it's definitely right. It's an issue. At the same time, it doesn't mean that remote work doesn't work for anything. It's just that if you're in a really highly collaborative environment, it's going to be difficult to do that remotely. So some jobs are better suited for remote work than other jobs are. Like I know the job that we're at now, like as an instructor, it's significantly harder for me to get information across remotely than it is in person. But that doesn't mean every job is going to have that same amount of struggle with it.
So I've actually seen a technology in the past employment that encouraged remote work called Sococo. This allows you to be able to have a virtual presence inside of a room, and the person can be able to go into that room, as you said, press a mic, right? But you have a virtual presence that you need to sign on to, during the work hours, so you can see who's online, where they're at in the virtual building. And I can actually go into your office and share my screen or have a voice conversation or a webcam conversation, just as if you're in that next room.
So that kind of gives you the dynamic that Pat was describing with that. But what's that cost? What kind of a cost is associated with that?
So there's definitely some licensing fees, just to use that
Certainly,
product. But other costs, with it is that you don't know if the person's actually there.
Well, that's why it's stupid, because what you actually need is them sitting on a camera and you can literally look at their face.
I mean, some places
Need them to have
actually
their
do
own
that.
personal shell bot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that is another valid way of doing remote work. But that's saying that you don't trust your remote workers.
Well, it's not even...
Well, that's where in a remote environment you have to have trust. I mean, I worked on a development team where almost everybody was remote. And that was one of the questions that my manager asked is, do you trust that these guys are getting their job done? It's like, I have to. I can't sit over and watch them. I had guys in 4 different time zones.
Well, I think that problem works itself out pretty quickly too. Even for in-person workers, I mean, they can sit there and pretend to work all day and do nothing.
Yeah.
But it becomes evident really quickly when the deadlines approach.
Yeah.
And I don't know. If you can't trust somebody to work by themselves, why did you hire them in the first place?
Yep.
So I don't think the trust is a huge problem, really, as long as you have a decent hiring process and training process and all that kind of stuff.
An evaluation process
Right.
Yeah.
But just...
Yeah, and I think setting expectations is really important too with remote people. So if you, because communication, what we're saying, it's what could take 10 minutes could be strung out into an 11-day affair, So you have to set that expectation as well, that if I email you, I'm going to need a response within X amount of time, for this level priority, stuff like that. And just setting the rules of engagement that if I contact you on Slack, I expect some sort of response, even if that response is, hey, I'm busy at the moment, I'll get back to you in a bit, within an hour or whatever it is, whatever your time frame is. That way you have those expectations set, and it's not so much of a, I don't know, I find that with remote work, a lot of times things can be passive aggressive, oh, well, I emailed so-and-so, or I pinged them on Slack and they didn't answer me for 4 hours. What are they doing? And so I think just setting those expectations and just being upfront and honest about it is, and having leadership be upfront and honest about those sorts of things is really important.
But also, okay, we work in a knowledge-based field, and if you have to be hyper vigilant about answering every message that you get at the second that it comes in, there's no chance you're going to be able to concentrate on the actual problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right, I agree with that too.
That comes back to making sure that you're saying, hey, I don't want to be disturbed right now. Set in our instance, we have Slack where in a meeting with a student, you set that status in a meeting.
Taking a nap, leave me alone.
Take a nap, yeah, it's easy.
Doing my laundry.
But you set those expectations. Wow.
Excuse our technical difficulties as Pat tries to put his tiny mic back on the mic stand.
This is very technical.
Yeah, this experiment is going to come to an end after this show. I can tell you
What do
that
you
right
mean?
now.
This works really good.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but having
Well,
that.
getting back to Randall's point on that, that's where like those chat applications and things where you can set a status work so nice is you can see that because we're talking about knowing if somebody's available, not interrupting their flow of production. That's something that happens when you're in person.
Yeah.
Honestly, I find it's much easier to get stuff done when I am working remote because I can ignore the chat windows or the emails or things like that until I'm ready to kind of get involved with those or go to meetings or whatever.
And I think that's a good point. I think there's a difference between the personal productivity you gain with remote work versus the collaboration you lose. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a balancing act is what's more important in your particular situation.
I believe there was a study that went remote workers at least three days a week got 10% more done productivity wise in a given week.
Yep.
Versus having to warm a seat.
Yeah, but I think the measure of productivity is typically completely just made up.
Yeah.
How do you measure productivity? How do we do that? Like I see that sort of measure all the time. Like I was just reading about how Yahoo took away remote work, and they said they increased their workers' productivity by 3% to the stroke of a pen and $150 million because that's how much it cost them apparently to get rid of remote work. But where does 3% come from?
You make up numbers.
Measure.
You make up some numbers and some metrics to measure it by.
Yeah, and it's all to justify the opinion you've already got.
Yeah,
but I mean that can be.
But you could have a team of super productive employees that are cranking out shitloads of code all the time, but it's all garbage that we throw away. Were you really productive? Probably not.
Yes.
But any productivity metric that measures by the number of issues that you close or how quickly you close them or
how many lines of code you wrote.
Yeah,
right.
All those things are just, I don't know, they're things that make managers feel good. But I don't know that they are based really in reality.
I don't even think they're things that make managers feel good. They're just things that managers can put in their spreadsheet and quantify to those above them.
Right.
That's all it really is.
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, the people that are making decisions need some sort of data, and when making an application, you don't. Those people don't know what the hell you're doing. They're going, the guy makes a widget. Tell me what percentage he's done. After that, I really don't care.
Right.
So you can say lines of code or number of features or how many issues, as long as the metric is universal.
I don't know that there are especially in knowledge-based fields and problem-solving type fields. If it were we're building factories, right? You could have a team that goes out and they build a huge factory that produces 1 billion widgets and it's the most efficient thing that you've ever seen in your life. We don't sell widgets. So burn that factory to the ground because it's worthless. It doesn't mean that you actually accomplish something because you could go off in the weeds and do things that are completely useless that would definitely trigger any productivity measure.
Right, and I think the lines of code one is particularly dumb because of that. I've seen people solve problems that are super simple. It's 1,000 lines of code. Have you guys seen FizzBuzz Enterprise Edition and stuff like that, where people take that idea, just go to the extreme? It's there's a factory and all the stuff for every single tiny thing, and it's 500 classes to do something that you could write in main.
Look how busy I was. I wrote all this code. Yeah.
Look at how productive I am. Look how smart I am. I'm a great worker. So I feel like that's what lines of code is for a metric. It's just the dumbest metric that you could possibly measure somebody by.
Yeah, agreed.
Especially if you value having concise things. You're valuing being bad at it.
Well, you're kind of putting them in a position where they have to make a choice, right? I can look really good by looking busy.
Yeah.
or I can be really good by making it very simple, but I'm not going to get rewarded for it.
Right.
So you set up a very weird paradigm, and to kind of maybe bring it back to the remote topic. I mean, you have to be very careful about what you're going to use as those expectations. Otherwise, you can set yourself up for failure very easily by saying, hey, I'm measuring these things that may or may not actually be viable for us to get whatever it is we're trying to do done. I mean, if it's how many, like we would run into this problem when I would recruit all the time. They'd measure how many phone calls you make, but they didn't check what numbers you were dialing. So I could just redial 1,000 times. I'd have 1,000 phone calls. It looked great.
Yeah, look how good I am.
My out dials were fantastic, but I had no input because I wasn't actually recruiting.
Just kept calling your mom
over and over again. My talk time looks good. I have 1,000 calls, and hey, I definitely earned that promotion, even though I haven't placed anybody in 3 years.
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful with that piece of, I think, the remote work. Now, I guess to kind of flip that is, it sounds like we've all had some experience or hands-on with the remote piece.
Yeah.
What have you guys done with it to maybe make it more effective, or to take it and make sure that you were doing the things that were going to help you be productive?
Make people come in person.
That's a good one.
I don't know.
Yeah, I used to do at least like a quarterly meeting with the majority of the team in person somewhere.
I think even just like getting people to talk to each other in person, like once a quarter or however often it is also nice because it helps build that team and that bond. And the better the bond is with your team, the more you feel responsible for them and your own work. Because if you mess up and you don't do what you're supposed to do, you're burdening your team. And so I feel like having that bond is going to make you more inclined to actually stay on track and do what you need to do, because you're like a part of a unit and it gives you that community, So I think like I work remote a lot, and I enjoy coming into the office every now and again, but not so much for productivity, but for the team building aspect. Like I don't have an issue with productivity or communication when I'm at home, because we have these expectations set and we've kind of figured out what our communication style is. And so that works. But the piece that's missing is that team building and, being a part of the company and community and feeling like I'm a part of it. So I like coming in for that more than anything else. And I think that helps me stay on track in general, just knowing that the people who are relying on me are real people and they're my friends and I work with them,
That's been the biggest problem that I've run into with remote teams too, is that you kind of forget that they're part of the team, and you treat them like they are a black box that you put instructions into, and then you somehow get code back, but like it's all invisible to you, and there's no face really, and you don't care as much about their success or failure as you would as somebody who's sitting right beside you, because there is a personal connection there. And it has dramatic impacts on the way people feel about their job and the people around them, and just feeling generally motivated to do a good job. It's way harder if you're isolated and you're sitting alone all the time. It's hard on both sides of the fence. It's hard to live through the isolation, and it's hard to make sure that the person on the other end stays human to you.
Yeah, and I know like with online working, having the mentoring stuff, like that's why I like having cameras on during mentoring sessions, because I feel like the people that I've connected with mentoring sessions multiple times, cameras on, we can see each other's faces, talk to each other, like they are way more accountable than somebody who doesn't know me or we have no rapport, we don't know each other. They don't care that I'm waiting for them to turn in an assignment or that I'm going to come bug them. Like they generally don't care because they don't know me, and I'm just, like you're saying, a black box.
And that's where I worked for a company where we had, I don't know, a dozen offices throughout the United States. There were tons of people working remotely. And the upper management was shocked at the productivity increase after we had an all-hands meeting. It was in Cleveland one year. And they're like, why did productivity go up so much? This doesn't make sense. And it's like, it makes perfect sense. Everybody got together, they met each other, they build that rapport. And then when you leave, it's no longer just a name on an email. It's somebody you know, you've met, you've talked to. Now you're more willing to go out of your way and get things done for them, or the collaboration gets built there. You find out new ways to communicate or new things about projects, stuff like that.
And I would say I've had a lot of remote capabilities in my career, a lot of times to be able to work remote. And I love the flexibility. Don't get me wrong, I really do love it. But the most successful situations I was in was the ones that was remote at most maybe 2-3 days a week.
Yeah.
And you were in the office at least part of the week. Because you were a team then.
I mean, that seems like a decent compromise that I've seen some places be relatively successful with. In have people come in sometimes.
Yeah.
And, develop the teamwork. I mean, that's kind of what we do here a lot is, we have a lot of remote people, but we meet up constantly and actually get to make sure we know each other and trust each other. And then during the times whenever you need to be isolated to be productive, like Victor was saying, like you don't want to be bothered by Slack messages or emails and such, like go work at home for a few days and then come back and show us what you did. Like that seems like it works okay.
Yeah,
It does. But I will also say that, on the opposite side of, I have tons of online, relationships that, I maintain completely virtual.
Yeah.
It's really about, how you communicate with that individual. There's people I've never met in real life that, I can tell you, their family history and, what's going on.
What kind of conversations are you having?
Creepy.
I'm just saying on a...
Morgan,
The person I've never met, I Googled your grandma.
Morgan,
Yes,
that could be a great segue into the discussion we were talking about earlier.
What I'm saying is not in the creepy factor of that you're building that type of a relationship or a rapport with that person through time of working with them even remotely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've experienced that a
All
little
right, so
bit.
Randall, how many of us have you Googled? I was going to say, Randall, how many of us have you Googled then? How much do you know about my grandma? I need to know.
A lot. I'll send you your ancestry link later.
The scary
good.
part of that is I'm not sure whether I believe him or not.
Like to know who I'm working with.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's knowing someone.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Good to know.
But after a long time of working with an individual, you get to know their quirks.
Well, I think the one thing about that though is you have to make that work. You have to have both people willing to do that.
Absolutely.
This
yeah.
cannot be a one-way street. You can't force this to happen.
Like, okay, I remember playing online games that this is how all online games have to work because you're not together, right? And you do have to be very collaborative on certain things. And in the online games, the only way to make it work most of the time is to get on some sort of server and put on headsets and talk to each other all the time.
Yes.
So why can't you do that remotely?
You can. I mean, I'm kind of saying that if you're going to try to have remote work where you want to mimic an in-person kind of collaborative environment, I think it's super important to, you should set up cameras and microphones and have everybody available to talk to just like you walked over to their desk. And I know that ruins some of the allure of working remotely because you're like, I just want to not wear pants.
Randall.
Hey.
All right, no, stay
up
there.
here. Cameras
Stay
up here.
there. Oh boy.
He's wearing pants.
I'm wearing pants.
Stand up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went behind the cameras.
So, apart from those kind of challenges, the team dynamics, what other challenge? I mean, one of the things that stands out to me is when you work remotely, you're always at work. If you work in your home, it is hard to really separate yourself from the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I was going to talk about too, like working from home all the time and having the tools on your cell phone and your laptop and everything. It's like, it's very difficult to separate the two things. So like, I try not to work when I'm at home. I try to like be in my office. So not to work like from the couch or whatever, just to have some amount of separation. Yep. But it is very difficult to maintain any sort of balance whenever everything, like your whole life is in your house. So there's no separation there.
Right.
Yeah, when I did remote work, I had to have a home office because then I could say, okay, if I'm in this room, I'm doing work, I'm active. As soon as I stepped out, I was home.
So, and when I did remote work, it was much similar. I had an office or a place to go, and a lot of the times I actually went out to Panera or get a change of scenery. One of the flexibilities of being remote is you get to choose your office. But once you're home, you should, definitely disconnect.
Yeah, you should.
But like again, back to like something we brought up earlier, like the expectations get really strange because a lot of times things come up at like 9 p.m. and it takes you 30 seconds to fix it, and it's fine because you're not doing anything else. But like you do that one time,
well, you're setting expectation,
and setting an expectation that you're going to do it all the time. And then like the lines are not as visible. Like when you're in person, you leave, everybody knows you're not there anymore.
Yep.
When you're remote, when you're working on a camera or whatever, the lines are not as clear because sometimes you're there, sometimes you're not, and I never know.
Right.
I mean, you set the expectation of saying, "Hey, I'm guaranteed to be online between this time and this time, in this time zone." If you try to reach to me outside of that, well, I'm sorry, I'm doing other things.
I get it, but sometimes it'll be fine. And
then you're saying that you're setting that expectation as a remote worker to say, "Hey, hit me up 24/7. I have no life."
I know.
Here's the thing, though. I don't think it's limited to developers or anything like that. My wife and I just talked about this. My wife is a teacher. That is the most in-person type of job you can, But with our maybe not, but with our technologically connected world today, expectations have changed dramatically. My wife, gets messages all the time, till 10 o'clock every night from parents, questions, things coming in all the time. She is always at work, even when she's home. And I think that permeates a lot of industries now, a lot of different professions. I think the technology has changed the expectation of work for the generations to come.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which is maybe good in some ways. Like, I don't know that it's ever a good measure of somebody's contribution to just measure like the sheer amount of time they spent near you.
Right.
Yeah, well, it goes back to what are we looking at? I mean, are we looking at your hours spent doing the thing or whether or not it's done and done well?
Right.
And I think this blurred boundary, you play a very dangerous game because if it's time, you're measuring time. Well, yeah, okay, then I guess we're all up all the time.
And I personally like that aspect of remote work, that it's a lot of the focus and feedback that I get is based on my job. Like, is the job done? Is it done well? Is there outstanding work? And not so much about like, are you at your desk all day, from 9 to 5? And so I know at my last job, it's like some days you have days where there's not a ton to do. And then you just have to sit there and figure out things to do, which can be nice because then you can explore new things and learn or whatever. But it feels like more pressure to just like be in the seat. Whereas when you're at home, if you have those days that are a little bit more relaxed, you can explore things at your own pace. You don't have to worry about looking like you're busy. Even if I know for me, sometimes even if I was busy at work and I looked more relaxed, it's like people would come up to me and bother me or whatever. And I don't know. I like that part of remote work where it's more focused about the job and is it done well and less about like just me being at my desk all the time.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise it's just you're warming a seat. And you got to ask the employer: are you paying for the seat to be warm, or are you paying for the seat to be to actually produce something?
They don't understand the difference. That's what I've noticed they don't understand the difference. Like I know that me when I'm writing code and things, like it's super helpful for me to get up and literally walk around and think. And I've done that at jobs in the past, and I have gotten feedback from them that they think when I'm doing that I'm just like off, whatever, not working.
Yeah.
And it's like
your hands on the keyboard don't, that's the only way you can produce.
That's what people that don't. That's what people. Okay, business people pay the paychecks,
right?
And they have no idea how development works at all. So they think it's like a factory, and if you're not there taking the nuts and bolts and putting them in boxes, that you are not being productive. And they don't understand that this is a completely different thing.
So I'm seeing more and more companies, move towards, some kind of remote option. So I'm thinking that, older managers that haven't really understood that fact that you just stated, and the newer managers are coming in going, yeah, go ahead and let the guy walk around in his underwear.
I mean, I hope they're not saying that.
Right.
I don't think we should do that in the office.
And on that note,
the thing that I've run into, especially with the company I'm working at now and everything, is just explaining to them that, look, when a developer's in the code and doing something, they're going to hit that point. They just need to get up and get away from it for a minute. And so, as people may have noticed with the background, I've had people walking by me all day. That's because I'm on a street with a large software company, and those guys do that constantly throughout the day. One of the developers I have loves to go take a walk outside for a couple minutes, clear his head, and then approach it back. I've definitely had to do that. And you're right. When you're in the office, it just looks funny that, hey, you had to stop working, get up from your desk, and move around. But when you're remote, it is so much easier to do that and be productive, because now there isn't that pressure that I have to sit in front of the keyboard. There's nobody watching me. There's that freedom to kind of do what I need to do to get the job done.
Absolutely.
But
Especially with development.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, with development, it's like everybody has their own process as well. So it's like what you need to do to get rid of that brain block is different for everybody. And some people can just sit down and just like hammer through it, and that's fine. And I know I'm also one of those people where I take a lot of frequent breaks. Like my brain needs a break.
Yeah.
And so I have like short bursts of productivity, and then I take a break. And I can't just sit there for 8 hours and just go. And so that's part of the reason why I also do enjoy remote work. Not every day, but like what we were saying, like a hybrid, like a few days a week.
Yeah. Okay, so back to something that you said earlier about we're doing knowledge-based work, right? And you work on it throughout the whole day, and you think about these problems, and like you work through it mentally. When you go home, your brain doesn't just automatically turn all that stuff off. Sometimes you'll be, hey, I'm mowing the lawn, and holy crap, I figured out how to do the thing.
Yeah.
And it has no bearing on the physical location, or even that I was actively working on that task. It's one of those things that, you start a process in your brain and it'll eventually complete. So,
well, guys, actually, we thank you, Randall, for making us late starting because we're out of time. So we got folks who have meetings to get to. So, but we want to thank you guys for being with us today, and look forward to doing more of this soon. We'll hopefully fix the audio problem, go back to our other mics. It's just going to be better.
Unless you're Pat, then Pat will have that.
Yeah, Pat will have something.
This is my new thing.
The tiny mic on the regular mic stand seemed to work out prime.
Perfect.
So maybe keep
really
doing
good.
that.
Yeah.
So it was an experiment. We're going to end it.
Yeah. YouTube channel.
So absolutely. So, make sure if you guys are catching us on YouTube, that's, by the way, youtube.com/c/devcoaches. If you're checking us out on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. If you're catching us on the podcast, be sure to subscribe on iTunes or any other your favorite podcast feeds. And we'll catch everybody next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening to the DevCoaches podcast. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit devcoaches.com and on Twitter @DevCoaches. We'll catch you next time.